Then we have New York City, the state attorney general, Letitia James, filing lawsuit against Facebook for antitrust practices. Basically, they're saying they're a monopoly and they gotta break them apart, right? A lot of other companies and the FTC have a lot of other states, 46 total states, have joined in on these lawsuits, and the FTC as well. So this is the first company. Remember, we saw like the big tech companies go in front of Congress like 3 or 4 times now, and they keep grilling them on everything and the anti-competitive practices. But you really have to watch the video with Letitia James here, where she just kind of, they really need to, they're demonizing Mark Zuckerberg in particular and Facebook to make it this evil thing that's stepping on all the small people beneath them. And it's interesting when you see the tone that they use when they're describing this situation, right? So one of the quotes from this was, they cannot allow large corporations to gain more and more power over our lives. And that's what they're saying Facebook is doing. They're kind of harvesting all this information and everything, and they're kind of selling it out to advertisers, and there's weird ad practices that are going on as well. It's funny how they say that there about a corporation, but when it's the federal government doing it illegally against, the Constitution, that's okay there. So I just thought that was an interesting point there. But if you look at the overall market share that Facebook owns in the social media market, it's around 60.52%. Okay, so they do have the majority. It's over 50. But looking at Google has 86.86% of the online search marketplace. How come they're not being sued here for the antitrust, against the Sherman Antitrust Act? Amazon, they have 40% of the online retail market. But if you look at Amazon's 40%, the next highest company there is Walmart with 5% of the online market. So you can see the dominance of Amazon versus all of those other small market segments that take up the rest of it. Then, it makes me wonder too, what is the reason why they're doing this? Is this just for brownie points? Is there a bigger goal to this? Like, why now, right? Facebook's been around for all this time. Why is now so important to do it? Is it because they didn't censor their people's posts enough to comply with what people wanted? Or there's got to be some bigger issue here. And they're looking at stuff like the Instagram and WhatsApp purchase that Facebook has done. And it's very interesting because, those went through the FTC and they approved both of those deals. And it's very easy to say that a deal like the Instagram one is anti-competitive now and it crushed a competitor and took them over. But I mean, there was a chance that Instagram wouldn't work out. It was originally only on iPhones, and when they bought it for like $1 billion, they took that company and made it to what it is today. So it's easy to look at it now when the company has gone through all these changes and everything, and Facebook has done what it wanted to do with it to make it into the business that helps their bottom line. And it's easy to say, now look at this giant monopoly that they have on that. I mean, that was a big risk for them to do that. Same thing with WhatsApp. They're still not sure how they're going to make money on that. They were talking about becoming an online marketplace for goods like eBay, and they would make money like that with WhatsApp. So yeah, we have to see how this is going to play out. But the big thing here, they have to show that Facebook, not that they just might be affecting the marketplace, they have to prove that competitors and consumers were harmed by their practices. So that's going to be a tough thing to prove here. And we're going to see if this one, remember Microsoft, when they got sued for antitrust, it was never the same company. They missed out on the whole mobile phone operating system market because of that. They were focused so much on the lawsuit. So we have to see if this is the first of many lawsuits that are going against tech companies, or maybe this is the only one. Time will tell. The Eurozone is also fining big tech companies. In particular, here we have Amazon and Google. So Google received a fine in France of $120 million, which is a record fine for violations of privacy in the European Union. So Amazon is also involved in these fines. And the big idea of it is that the companies improperly collected information on users that visited the websites by the use of cookies. So they give Santa's cookies to them and they eat them, and I don't know what goes on with that. Or maybe they mean those cookies that they install on your computer and track everything you do and feed it back to them so that they can sell it to advertisers, which is the whole point of them, right? So besides this main suit here that they did against Google, there's also a contingency that those companies can be fined $100,000, 100,000 euros a day unless they can explain how the cookies are being used by the company. And to think of, maybe you can just do a simple thing like they sell the data to advertisers, obviously, but to do a breakdown for every user and exactly how it is being used by Google and by Amazon, that's a pretty crazy ordeal to go through there. So we'll have to see if they could even do that, and if there's a fight against these lawsuits or they just pay the fines here. Next up, we had another IPO, C3.ai Inc. So this one was up 120% on Wednesday's IPO. Another one of these giant tech stocks that kind of went up a huge amount. Then they gained another 40% by the end of the week. So that one was doing strongly as well. Separate from the IPOs, we also have an old company that's been around for a while. We have Disney hitting an all-time high. So they announced some of their earnings and some of the news from them. And the thing was, if you're looking at it, it's like what's very interesting to me is the amount of subscribers they were able to gain on this Disney Plus platform. So you look at companies like Netflix and Hulu, and well, Hulu is now part of Disney, right? But you have Netflix and HBO Go, HBO Max. You have different ones that are trying to get into this kind of online marketplace for video distribution. Disney has 86.8 million subscribers right now on streaming. They blew past all of their estimates. HBO Max, they've been around for a while, and I mean, they kind of reinvented their platform, but they only have 12.6 million subscribers. And remember in the other video, we talked about how Warner Brothers is trying to release all their movies on HBO Max now, and HBO Max needs that because look at what their competitor is doing. Disney has 86, they have 90 million subscribers pretty much. So HBO Max would have to try and catch up to Disney, which is just a powerhouse here. And why is that, right? Well, Disney owns all of these franchises that have been around for as long as you've been alive, pretty much. So if you look in just 2019, they also had 7 of the top 10 grossing movies of 2019. They were owned by Disney. On top of that, they still have a big slate for movies being released in 2021. And a lot of this stuff is also being put onto their Disney Plus platform. So another interesting thing here is that it is doing so well, they're just going to raise the price to $7.99 a month now, starting in March 2021 for Disney Plus subscription. So they're already raising their prices. It's only been out for what, a year or so, or 2 years or something? And they're already raising the prices. Next up, we have Oracle, which is moving their headquarters to Austin, Texas, because I guess they want to be closer to where Elon Musk is going to live, because he also announced that he's moving to Austin, Texas, the new hot place for people to go to get out of California. Oracle's headquarters was actually in Silicon Valley in California, so they're getting out of there as well. We have some news also in the Eurozone about the central bank stimulus. So the European Central Bank has just been pumping money into financial markets there because of the pandemic. So if you look at their bond buying program, they increased it by more than a third going into this lockdown period that we're in here, right? So they're giving dirt cheap loans to banks, and they're doing a new stimulus package on top of that. So now, if you look at how much they've done over all this time, it's between 3 trillion euros, and I mean, that's 3 trillion euros is about $3.63 trillion that they have sent into the economy as a stimulus. That's pretty incredible right there. And this is for a 19-country bloc Eurozone. And if you're looking at this, America's doing the same thing. The central bank here is we're doing stimulus and saving banks and putting more loans out and everything else. So all of this money is eventually going to go into prices somewhere. We're seeing it in financial assets. Why do you think IPOs are doubling on their debut all the time when they don't even earn any money? They're not even earning any profits. So we're seeing the money in the financial markets. Eventually, that's going to go into other areas of the economy, eventually to consumer goods when you're buying stuff, eventually into housing prices and rentals and your food and energy costs. So this is going to be this is going to be an amazing time to document what is happening here, because stuff like this has never happened before in all of history. It's not on this scale that we're doing now. So to see how it eventually affects the economies is going to be pretty incredible. So we did have some bad news about the unemployment numbers. They came up for 853,000 people filed for unemployment benefits in the past week. So this kind of it stopped the trend that was going kind of down or staying steady at around like 700. It was between 700 and 800,000 people that were filing for these jobless claims. Now it's shot up to 853. So that's an increase of 137,000 from what it was the week before. This is actually the highest week since September. Now, on top of that, like, you have to keep in mind that we're thinking that we're coming out of this pandemic, but the unemployment numbers, which is a lagging indicator, they are still not showing that we are out of the woods yet. And I think it's an important factor to watch this, because when you see this really drop down, that's when we are going to be skyrocketing out of the pandemic economy. Remember we spoke about OPEC and Russia, and they increased their oil production because they thought the pandemic was kind of winding down and people are going to start traveling again? Well, oil just topped $50 a barrel right now. So this is the first time since March when we went into the lockdown. So that was kind of interesting there. The oil sector has now rallied. This is, stocks like ExxonMobil and Chevron, up 35% since the end of September for the oil sector in the economy, right? But if you look at the full year, they're still down about 30% for the year. So they still have some room they would need to run up to be able to get back to break even at least. Then we have a surprising announcement that came out from a report submitted to Congress annually by the Pentagon. So they said the People's Republic of China has the largest navy in the world, with an overall battle force of approximately 350 ships and submarines, including over 130 major surface combatants. So this is the first time that we're really seeing the Chinese Navy surpassing the United States. The United States was way above every other country in terms of the Navy. We always had 6 times the next highest Navy. And now China, who says that they're not doing like militaristic things here, are silently expanding their army and their navy and everything else to become more militaristic, right? So in comparison, the U.S. Navy force is 293 ships. They now have 350. So while they might have more of the smaller size ships, we have 12 aircraft carriers, I believe. They have 2. So there's some differences like that, but still they're on an uptrend, and we're on a trend of we can't pay for what we have already. I thought that was very interesting there. And they just announced also that they have a new stealth bomber that pretty much looks just like our B-2 stealth bomber that came out some time ago. So now they can, they have a lot of military advantages here that if they have money to spend on this stuff, there's a lot of businesses that are going to go and start selling to China here and to Asian countries instead of the United States. It, could potentially change the marketplace for arms and deals like that. Next up, this one was pretty cool on the innovation side. We had a company called Joby Aviation. So they make flying taxis, vertical landing and takeoff vehicles. So I can say that right there. So what it is basically like a helicopter where they can go up and down very easily in limited space. And the advantage of this is that when they're making taxis, they basically look like drones, giant drones that up to 4 people can sit in. They don't even need a pilot. They can be automatically programmed to taxi people around to different areas. And the Air Force just came out and they passed this company's vehicle for their safety standards. So now this means that theoretically, they could create vehicles for the US military now because they've cleared the safety regulations and the rules to be able to do so. So it also gives them an option to get grants from the federal government on these types of projects that they're doing for these air taxis. The end goal is to be like what we had heard about in Dubai, where they want to have, taxis can fly from one skyscraper to another or from one part of a city to another. Imagine you could just call up, hey, I got to go to work, and you get an air taxi come pick you up with no pilot and just takes you to where you need to go. You can just sit back and relax the whole time. That's pretty crazy right there. So I like that that's a bit of innovation that we're seeing here. And, we've been waiting for flying cars for 100 years. So it's pretty cool that we take steps closer to that direction. Then we have some news about mortgages. So mortgages in the United States are on a tear lately because of refinancing. The total amount of mortgages, it was about 2.8 trillion of mortgages in the first 9 months of 2020. So that's significant because we're on track to potentially beat the prior record of the most mortgages issued in a year which was in 2003, and it was $3.7 trillion. We could potentially beat that with the final quarter of 2020. That would be pretty incredible because it's not like we're in a great economy right now. We're in a recession and a lockdown, and yet people are doing so many refinances that is pushing up these numbers so much, right? The Federal Reserve's buying treasury bonds, they're buying mortgage-backed securities, and they're driving the interest rates down to like nothing. So you can get these mortgages with very low rates. It's like below 3% now, and people are refinancing to save a lot of money on their monthly payments. So refinances were 65% of the mortgages for 2020. That is the highest since 2012. Where can it go from here, right? Can you go below 3%? I mean, can they go to 1%? Maybe if somehow the Federal Reserve is able to make the Fed funds rate go negative or something like that. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It shouldn't be able to go this low. And we're seeing these distortions in the bond market. Remember, on the last video, I spoke about how corporate bonds are now yielding less than the financial expectations. So this is something here where there are big cracks showing in the bond markets. And I want to really follow this because the next giant bubble is potentially the sovereign debt bubble. Next up, we have a lot of people thinking of these IPOs and thinking of FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Well, don't worry about the IPOs. Check out this stock, Xpel Inc. So this was a company, and the stock was trading under $3 a share. At one point, it got down to 10 cents a share. And it was doing that for 12 years, going back to the year 2006. Okay, so why is this important? Why is this relevant? Well, it started to jump in 2018, and the stock now trades at $46.52 a share from where it was trading at 10 cents a share. And if you're looking at that from a penny stock increase percentage here, that's 170,000% increase since going public. So when you hear people talking about, hey, I made all this money in the IPO and Airbnb and DoorDash and I owned Amazon when it first came out, or Tesla, which is up 600 a year or 600% in a year. All these companies, you just tell them, what about this Xpel? What if you had that one and made 170,000% increase? So on that note, I'll end that with the delusions of grandeur there, where you could win big. But we'll tune in next time and see all the other business updates and see the amazing things that are happening in the marketplace. Until next time.